We've all done it, sold that one book just too soon or let that one get away. In this video, I share with you guys the top 5 comics that I regret selling. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another video with Swaggle. And in this video, I'm going to share with you guys the top 5 comics that I regret selling. Now, I thought that this would be kind of a fun video to do, something a little bit different. Actually, maybe not a fun video to do because I feel like it's going to just drum up bad emotions for myself. But if anything, maybe it'll be a cathartic experience to just share with you guys some of the books that I regret having sold in my comic book collecting career. Now, just to preface, I haven't had any experiences like, I sold my AF-15 10 years ago for $200 or whatever the case may be. Some of these things ultimately are not necessarily that I left like thousands and thousands of dollars on the table, but they're just books that like it still bothers me to this day that I let that one go. And they all have like various reasons as to why it bothers me. So I thought I would share them with you guys here today. And definitely in the comments, let me know your guys' horror stories as well. Like what books do you regret selling so that we can all comfort each other in our misery. But before I get into my top 5 picks, if you guys could drop me a like, comment, subscribe. If you're enjoying the content, help support the channel, do one of those things, and I would appreciate it. But let's get into my list here. And coming in at the number 5 spot is actually kind of multiple books here because I'm going to lump them together. But in this 5th spot, I regret selling all of my Something is Killing the Children issues. And this group consists of 1 copy of issue number 2 and 4 copies of issue number 3. Now, this is a book, of course, everyone knows Something is Killing the Children. It's been extremely hot in the market. Everybody loves the series. Everybody's been jumping on the series. And I happened to find these 5 copies in a dollar bin. Like I was that lucky person who found them in a dollar bin. This was like, at the, I don't know, whenever these books had come out, obviously like, people were kind of talking about them. There's a little bit of buzz, but they weren't what they, eventually have become here, in this current climate. So, I happened to come across these books, and when I found them in the dollar bin, I was like, oh yeah, these are pretty hot. Like I think people, want these things, and I picked all 5 of them up for $1 or whatever it was, and then ended up flipping them essentially on eBay like a couple weeks later for like, I don't know, $12, $13, $14, $15, whatever the going rate was for all of those books. So for starters, I totally regret selling it because, now when we look at the prices, they are 100x of what they were at that time. And then number 2, ultimately, I think the biggest kicker for me is that I actually just wish that I just held on to at least 1 copy of issue number 3. I mean, I had 4, so I had 3 to part with. If I sold number 2, okay, that would have been, just me letting go of it. But I just wish that I held on to that one. So that one always, eats me up a little bit. I wish I didn't let that one go, at least not yet, because I feel like that book is still going to the moon. All right, moving on to the next book that I actually regret selling here is actually my copy of Fantastic Four number 94. Of course, this is the first appearance of Agatha Harkness, who famously made her debut in the WandaVision series. Now, this is a book that I happened to find for myself sometime last year when, the rumors were circulating that, Agatha was maybe going to play a role in the WandaVision show. But, at that time, they were like, really, really deep rumors. I mean, there was nothing to assume that we were actually going to get her. But I ended up coming across that book. I found it for like $5 or something like that. And, I was really excited to find it when I got it. But I had no emotional attachment to Agatha Harkness in any kind of way. And I ended up actually moving on with that book and selling it, a few months later, but still before we actually got the WandaVision show. I ended up letting go of that book. And I think I ended up selling my copy for about $20 or so. And then, of course, we got what we got with WandaVision, and that book absolutely exploded. I mean, we're talking insane levels at the high grade. I mean, they were selling for like $500, $600 or whatever the case was at the time. And this kind of like marked that whole new, comic book boom. I think like WandaVision, like those prices were like, set the precedent, or maybe it was like the Mandalorian that actually kind of started it. And then it really, really took off with the Marvel shows later on with WandaVision. And I just remember thinking to myself, like just feeling so jealous of the people that were cashing in on their books, knowing that I let go of mine for $20 just a month earlier or so, and now my book was like probably a 5.0 or something like that, so it wasn't necessarily like super high grade, but I definitely regretted selling it when I did, especially when we were living that moment in the WandaVision, especially when we got the it was Agatha all along reveal. That definitely hurt, but then on top of that, not just from like an economic standpoint, but regretting selling it because I actually think Agatha Harkness is a pretty cool character. I've since gone back and read a lot of the comic books that she's been involved in, and I think that there's a lot of story that can be told with her. And being someone who really loves collecting Silver Age books, even economics aside, I actually kind of feel like I would really want to have that book just in my collection. I think that Catherine Hahn did a great job with the character she played. I think we're gonna get a lot more of her in the MCU in the future, and that's just a book that I think I would just like to have in my collection. So for that reason, I also regret just moving on with it, because now I'm going to have to pay some kind of premium unless I get lucky again. All right, moving on to the top 3 now. The third most regretted book that I've ended up selling in my comic book collecting career was Iron Man and Submariner #1. This, of course, was that issue that would lead them to be, on their own solo titles when they would merge Tales of Suspense and Tales to Astonish. I actually had a copy of this book, probably around like a 4.5 or a 5.0. So it was a really nice looking copy. And I had it for like a couple years, and this was a book that I always cherished. It was always on my wall. I very much enjoyed it. But when I ended up acquiring an Iron Man #1 for myself, I decided that like, hey, like I don't really need this book anymore. I got, the satisfaction I have with my new Iron Man 1. Let me move with my, Iron Man Submariner #1 and, have it like offset some of the cost of my Iron Man #1. So I ended up selling my Iron Man Submariner book #1 for, I don't know, whatever it was at the time, $65 or something like that on eBay. And, flash forward to now, and that book is like triple the price of what it was at the time in which I sold it. And then also, on top of the fact that like the value is much higher now, I also just kind of feel like as far as a collector book for the Submariner, that was probably one of the better ones that I had for, a Submariner book. So to me, I'm kind of like regretting that, I didn't just hold on to it. Like I felt like my Iron Man 1 could just replace that, but now I don't have anything that kind of represents Submariner in any kind of cool way. And now I wish that I had that book again, because I also just think it's a great cover. It's a classic book and one that is just great to have in a collection, even MCU aside. All right, moving on to the book that I regret the second most is actually a book that I had, actually I should say my brother had it when we were growing up as kids. This was one of the few keys that I actually had in my collection when I got back into comic book collecting and kind of like was a more educated, around what the key books were and whatnot. But I actually had a copy of New Mutants 87, which of course is the first appearance of Cable. And this is a book that like, I remember getting this like as a kid, or at least my brother had it in his collection, and we thought it was a cool book. Everybody loved Cable, especially with the animated show, and Cable was such a cool character at the time. So when we got that book, it was definitely like one of the cool keys we had, along like some of the other ones, like one that I'm going to talk about very soon, but like some of the other ones like First Bishop and Carnage and characters like that came out in the Copper Age. So that was a very cool book that we had in our collection. And later on, when I started to sell my collection, which was like a few years ago, I started like, moving stuff on eBay, when I kind of didn't feel like any attachment for any of those books, with the exception of my Darkhawk ones and the Wolverine ones that my brother had, I was like, oh, cool, this book has some value. I don't really care about Cable that much, like at least at that time. And I was like, yeah, I'll just move this because like, cool, I can make like whatever, like $80 or $90 just selling this right now. So I put it on eBay, listed it, sold it. And definitely like, it wasn't at the time when I regretted selling it, but I feel like flash forward to now, when I look back to like, selling that book, I'm definitely like, I definitely regret letting that one go. I mean, it's not a book that it's necessarily hard to reacquire for myself. And I don't necessarily have a emotional attachment to that specific copy. I just am frustrated that I'll have to pay $150 to get another copy of a raw first appearance of Cable. And I do actually think that, Josh Brolin is still going to play a role in the MCU. So, we might see a lot more Cable coming up in the near future. All right, and moving on to the book that I regret selling the most is a copy of Thor 337 first appearance of Beta Ray Bill. This, of course, was another book that I happened to have in my collection when I was a kid. Again, I say my, but it was actually my brother's. And similar to the Cable one, this is just one of those books that, you know, was a key, but like I personally didn't really know too much about Beta Ray Bill at the time when I was growing up and I was young. And then later on when, like, you know, I started selling comic books on eBay, I knew I had a copy of it and I was like, oh, okay, this is worth some value, but whatever, I'm just going to put this on eBay. And I ended up selling it for like $60 or something like that. And definitely now I 100%, that's the book I feel like I regret the most. And again, it's not necessarily that I'm like emotionally attached to that copy. And that's the reason I'm kicking myself for letting it go. I'm just kicking myself because one, it's super, super expensive now. And then two, as I've like, you know, read more comic books and learned more about Beta Ray Bill and now the excitement that we, you know, might get Beta Ray Bill in the MCU. This is the one book that I'm just like, of all the books that I've sold, this is actually the one that I'm like, I wish I still had that in my collection because I think Beta Ray Bill is an awesome character. It's a classic cover. I think, you know, it's just everything you would want for a first appearance like that from a character like in a book that came out in the Copper Age. And that's one that I absolutely regret selling. Anyways, those are my top 5 books that I regret selling. I mean, thankfully, you know, none of these books are stuff where it's like, oh, I left thousands and thousands of dollars on the table. None of these books are books that like would be necessarily impossible for me to be able to reacquire again. I can totally do it. It's really just more of an annoyance that I would have to pay what I need to pay for them now to have them back in my collection. But I thought it would be kind of fun and cathartic to share my experience with you guys. Anyways, let me know what you guys think. What books have you sold in your comic collection that you regret selling? Does anyone have any horror stories out there? I definitely feel you if you do have horror stories, especially if you've had to, you know, regrettably sell a piece in your collection because you needed to pay for a bill. I'm very fortunate. Luckily, I've never had to do anything like that, at least not yet. Knock on wood somewhere. Knock on Ghostwriter. But yeah, let me know what you guys think. Let me know your stories. Drop me a like, comment, subscribe if you're enjoying the content, and I will see you in the next video.